As an adult, it's interesting to look back at your game collection and notice what kind of games you had before and after you started being able to decide what games you'd get, or even started buying them yourself. It's an interesting difference. From my experience, looking at my Switch library to my GameCube library is quite telling. Now, of course, I still got games like Luigi's Mansion, Mario Sunshine, Smash Bros. Melee, and Thousand Year Door, but I also for some reason have Robots, SpongeBob, Revenge of the Flying Dutchman, Rocket Power Beach Bandits, Ed, Edd n Eddy The Misadventures, Finding Nemo, and Nickelodeon Party Blast. Games I would never buy for myself nowadays. Who would look at a copy of Shrek for Xbox and think that would end up being a good game? Parents would. They see a popular kids brand, and, well, it must be good, right? The movie was good, so surely the same could be said for the game. It's unfortunate that so many kids got mediocre or straight up bad games because of this. But it's not all bad. I'm of the opinion that it's good to play bad games as it gives you more of a refined perspective. Many times I see people call good or at least decent games outright bad, and I have to wonder if they've ever actually played a truly bad game if that's what they consider awful. You start seeing games differently once you've played something truly dreadful. Suddenly, it's a lot easier to appreciate games for what they are, and realize just how special the actually really good games are. You bet I appreciated Mario Party 6 a lot more after experiencing the mediocrity of Nickelodeon Party Blast. Why did my friends always want to play that game again? But also, sometimes one of these seemingly shovelware cash grabs can surprise you and actually be rather good. The original Xbox was an interesting console for me growing up, as it was really the first non-Nintendo console I ever had. The games I could play on it were rather limited, given at the time I wasn't allowed to play M-rated games. Hell, it was even selective what T-rated games I could play, so no Halo for me. This was more my sister's console, as she was much older than me, but there were still a few games I played and rather liked. One of which was a little game called Taz Wanted. Now, you might look at this game and think it wasn't special. And in the grand scheme of things, it probably isn't all that special at all. But it was special to me, damn it. So, I'm gonna talk about it. So, let's begin. You wouldn't think a Looney Tunes game, one based on the Tasmanian Devil no less, would have much of a story, and you'd be right. The first thing you see is a short intro where Taz pisses off numerous Looney Tunes characters, who then chase him. This has nothing to do with the actual story, but is a fun way to introduce the characters, especially Taz. It already feels like Looney Tunes, which is good. Although most of these characters don't even really do much at all. Wile E. Coyote only has a couple cameo appearances in the game, and that's it. But anyways, the real story starts with Taz and his girlfriend, She-Taz, just enjoying each other's company in their home. But then they get captured by Yosemite Sam, who put Taz in a zoo and turned his home island into Tazland Amazement Park. He's also taking the She-Taz to his Gladiatoons show. This causes Taz to rage and break free from his cage. Sam then puts a bounty on Taz and places wanted posters all over the place. Taz gets some advice from Tweety and then sets off to destroy all the wanted posters and, well, anything else that gets in his way. He has a few encounters with Sam and his henchmen, even ends up on Gladiatoons and gets captured by Daffy, but breaks free shortly after, and eventually makes his way to Tazland where he defeats Sam. But it's not over, as it's revealed that Tweety was behind everything. No reason given or motivation behind this, but it was him all along. Taz defeats him, frees She-Taz, and crash lands back home. And that's it. No one expected anything more of this story, but it didn't need to be anything more. What's more important here is the writing. It has been an awfully long time since I've watched any Looney Tunes, but from memory, the writing feels just like the cartoons. All the characters are in character, and it's just as hilarious as the cartoons. The highlight of the whole cast is easily Yosemite Sam himself. They really nailed his character. He has this presence throughout the entire game. You never forget about him. He also reacts to you destroying his stuff. It's just the same few lines repeated over and over again, but I never get tired of it. And anytime Sam is on screen, it's always a joy.
Going up! Oh! Oh! Gold darn rassin' frassin' low feeling volcano!
He definitely has the funniest moments. Unfortunately, the audio quality for the voice acting is a bit low, and it's not always properly synced to the scenes, so you'll have times of dialogue being cut off.
We got Looney Tunes with its subtropical splendors, Looney Lagoon with its... And here are our latest attractions.
Or overlaying the previous sentence.
Welcome to your doom, Mr. Devil. You think you can avoid this here dynamite and blow me up? I don't think so. If you weren't such a slow-thinking varmint, you'd notice the fragile crates is marked with big red crosses. And if you weren't such a dim-witted, pesky little furball, you'd never even see them 4 extra explosive fireworks crates here next to my own genius-like self. Now would you?
It doesn't take much away, but it's pretty noticeable. But while Sam is great in this game, the cast is pretty small. I mentioned how the opening sequence introduced a bunch of characters for them to only really be used as cameos. A couple times you'll see Wile E. Coyote for some slapstick, but that's it. Daffy is just one boss fight, Elmer Fudd is just a cameo in Daffy's fight and has 0 lines. And I don't think Sylvester even makes another appearance. Bugs Bunny also isn't in this game outside of Sam referencing him.
Oh, you're as bad as that pesky rabbit!
And these paintings that always kind of creeped me out as a kid. This is a game about Taz first and foremost, with the extended Looney Tunes cast just added for fan service. Taz, as you'd expect, doesn't say much. You'll have Tweety there to give you hints, but aside from that, most dialogue comes from Sam. So without more of the talkative characters being the focus, they relied on what Looney Tunes does best, slapstick. This game is full of slapstick, and it's pretty great. Almost every scene has Taz getting knocked around, flattened, blown up, and all matters of physical trauma. It's absurd cartoon logic at its finest. Like, why does this minecart have an anchor? Because it's funny. And of course the classic getting out of the way of the shadow, but still getting hit by it anyways. At the end of each level, you get a slapstick sequence that results in an object from that level being moved to the hub. And once all the objects are in place, you get another slapstick sequence where Taz very elegantly makes his way to the boss. They even incorporate slapstick into the gameplay, which is pretty cool, but I'll go over that more later. There's not much to say, really. I could try to analyze each scene and judge how good each bit of slapstick is, but that's outside my skill set. And really, there's nothing deep here. It's a game about the Tasmanian devil. What more could you even expect aside from some hilarious dialogue and slapstick? And that's what they set out to do, and I say they accomplished it fairly well. They could have done more with the other characters, but the focus is on Taz and Sam. Probably for the best to not have them be overshadowed. But moving on to the presentation, it can be tricky to take a 2D design and translate it to 3D, especially on 6th gen hardware. It's certainly a lot better nowadays, but back then, man, it could get ugly. But Taz Wanted does a pretty good job at it. The characters are spot on, minus a few quirks like the brim of Sam's hat. But they look about as well as you'd want. And they are very expressive too, which is a very important element to capture. All this slapstick wouldn't work very well if Taz wasn't expressive, or the animations weren't good. Taz will often go off model to better show the impact of what happens to him, such as getting flattened in various different ways. They are rather faithful to the cartoons in how they present things. Animation is obviously very important for slapstick, and this feels about what you'd expect out of a 3D version of those cartoons, at least for the time. The environments also feel appropriate, displaying the same wackiness as you'd expect. There's quite a lot of detail in these environments, as well as visual gags that the game just lets you notice for yourself. Some stuff in the environments are just bizarre, like for some reason in the beach level there's a giant washing machine and sink. I have no idea why. But some of the funniest things in the environment are the wanted posters themselves. These wanted posters are in some rather ludicrous places. You have the standard signs, but a lot of them are just silly. Why is there a wanted poster on this beehive? Or on this truck about to fall off a cliff? There's a cement mixer truck that's dropping blocks of cement with wanted posters on them. This is absurd to an insane degree, and I love it. Someone painted a wanted poster on the floor in a museum. There's a wanted poster clock. There's a wanted poster gas station. At this point, why doesn't Sam just make Taz Wanted merch? Where's Taz Wanted the flamethrower?
That kids love this one.
This game already did several sci-fi references in one scene, why not throw in some Spaceballs as well? Some of these posters are just in places no one is even going to see, and some are just set up to be destroyed, like this one in front of a wrecking ball, or this one on the ceiling of a mine with a drill pointed right at it. The lengths Sam goes to let people know that Taz is wanted is absurd, and it adds a lot of charm and personality to these locations. It's fun just looking around these places to see all the weird stuff, though some are more interesting than others. This level is a big construction site, and it has so much detail to it. It's just as absurd as any cartoon construction site, and I love it. It's probably the most visually interesting level. This ice level, on the other hand, doesn't really do much interesting outside of the usual ice level tropes. Just add in some Christmas stuff. But most levels are more on the interesting side. There's not a whole lot to be said about the visuals. They are pretty good, certainly above the average for licensed games back then. It makes good use out of the Looney Tunes aesthetic, has pretty detailed environments and great animations. Another surprisingly good thing about this game is the music, actually. It's pretty high energy and has a lot of guitars. One really cool thing about the music is it adapts to what you're doing in a way. You have the normal music when you're just walking around. But then a low energy version for when you're tiptoeing. And then an even higher energy rocking variant when you're spinning. And it's pretty seamless how it changes between these three versions. Though the spin variant tends to be my least favorite of the three. Not that it's bad, I just prefer the normal versions in basically all cases, and the tiptoe variant just has a different vibe to it that's pretty chill and I like it. Only real thing I have to complain about is the tracks themselves are rather short, most of which only really lasting about a minute. Now, I never really felt the music was too repetitive, but it would have been nice to have longer pieces. Also, sometimes the music doesn't loop properly. It just kind of awkwardly stops, then restarts after a second.
Eat this, you furball!
Also, some tracks are not so subtly inspired by other famous songs, like Disco Volcano. I don't think I have to tell you its inspiration. Or how about Cartoon Strip Mine? Yeah, that's just Indiana Jones. But to give some highlights, Elephant Pong is really great. And I know that name might have you asking questions, but I'll answer them much later. Honestly, most of the level music past the first world is great, like Samsonian Museum. Taz Wanted. Oh, Granny Canyon is fantastic. And probably my favorite is Looney. Although there is one track I'm not too fond of, Tazland. I don't know how to describe it, but compared to most of the rest of the soundtrack, this one always just felt off. Like, it's so basic and boring, and lacking that energy that the rest of the music has. At least the spin and tiptoe variants are just as good as the other spin and tiptoe variants. Actually, this tiptoe variant is probably one of my favorite tiptoe variants in the game. Funny how that works. This is like the only time the normal version of a track is my least favorite. And I think I basically showed off half of the soundtrack here. That's the other thing. It's a short soundtrack. Having 3 variants for all the level themes does stretch it out, but it's still pretty small. But they at least still went hard on making a banger of a soundtrack despite its small size. Now moving on to the gameplay. Taz Wanted is a 3D platformer, as you'd expect a licensed game of a cartoon from this era. Taz controls pretty well, decent movement speed and jump. It's not the highest jump, but it gets the job done. The game has a weird collision where you can sometimes kind of jump up walls or off things you're clearly not standing on. It is actually helpful though, being able to get up places you think you can't. Some people have criticized the camera, but honestly I have no idea what they're talking about. The camera works just fine to me. I really don't know what it is about cameras that people can't deal with. There are very few games where I can honestly say the camera is bad, and this game doesn't make that list. Taz has a rather simple moveset. He can bite, which can be used as an attack, but its main purpose is eating the various destructible objects in the environment. Once consumed, he can spit it back out to act as a projectile. It can be a bit hard to be precise with it though, and it's not the most useful ability even if it can be fun to use. By pushing X, Taz will just kinda yell, and it doesn't really do anything. You might scare some enemies if you sneak up on them, but otherwise it's useless. But found throughout the levels are these telephone booths. Once you enter them, you get a costume. With a costume, the X button now acts as a unique attack, each costume having a different attack. The skater gives you a skateboard for a short burst of speed. The snowboarder allows you to throw snowballs. The surfer, well, you just hit things with a surfboard. I always found this one to be one of the funnier ones, but the range sucks. The ninja does a jump kick. It also has pathetic range, but when you land a hit... Damn, that's satisfying. The DJ will play some music that will distract enemies. The SWAT will shoot some stinky cheese. The cowboy shoots 3 times with his fingers. The werewolf has a claw attack that is also short range. The Indiana Jones one just throws his hat. And the jungle one, well, does this. Oh, and I guess there's also the reindeer costume, but that's just in one of the hubs and is only there to be a tutorial. Plus, its range also sucks. These costumes add a decent amount of variety, even if they all serve the same function, and some of them basically act more or less the same. If anything, I just like wearing them for the visual variety, and they can be fun to use, but they are never required for anything. They have one main function that I'll go over later, but that function is never for platforming, exploration, or puzzle solving. And it is a bit of a missed opportunity to not have these costumes give you more unique abilities that could help in more unique ways. Something more like how the transformations in the Banjo games are used, but without taking away your base moveset. These costumes are a neat idea, but they didn't really take advantage of the concept. All they do is give one unique attack that, for most of them, is overshadowed by Taz's main ability. By holding the B button, Taz will do his signature spin. While spinning, you will hurt any enemies and destroy any destructible objects you come into contact with. You also move a lot faster like this, can go up steeper slopes, but are harder to control. Also, if you start spinning in place without moving and then move, you get launched in that direction. This spin move is the main thing that makes this game so enjoyable. Just being able to zoom through levels, destroying everything in your path is pretty fun. Now, you can't just spin through everything. And as I said, you're harder to control, so you'll need to be good enough to navigate without being slowed down. Unlike the costumes, this is actually used for things, though they do tend to be simple. Regardless, it's fun to use, and without it, the game would just be a run-of-the-mill 6th-gen 3D platformer. There are some temporary power-ups you can find throughout the game. First is the invisibility potion, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty helpful for sneaking up on enemies or past certain obstacles. There's the hiccup soda, which will cause you to start hiccuping, which makes you jump high. You can't control when he hiccups. The bubble gum makes Taz float for a limited time, usually to get to specific areas or get sandwiches. How does he eat sandwiches while blowing a bubble? The mega hot chili peppers give you a fire breath attack that can destroy certain obstacles. And the super burp soda can gives you a one-use burp explosion attack that destroys everything close by. These power-ups aren't used super frequently, but they are a nice addition to spice up the normal gameplay. Often there are challenges where you need to get somewhere with the power-up without it running out, or losing it to an obstacle. Certain hazards can take away your power-up, like these sticks of dynamite that are littered everywhere. Throughout the game are just these sticks of dynamite. If you touch one, Taz eats it and gets stunned for a moment. That's it. I don't know why these are here. They don't add any challenge outside of some parts requiring power-ups. But they aren't just in areas that use power-ups, they're all over the place and are just an annoyance. I usually just intentionally eat them to get rid of them, because they don't respawn, which invalidates any challenge they could have had. But that is just kind of annoying. There are also 2 different stun animations. One is fairly quick and isn't that intrusive, but the other takes a couple seconds and it just interrupts the flow. It's not a big deal, these things hardly affect the game, but it's just a bit annoying, and they shouldn't have even been in the game. Now, there is one important attribute that Taz has, and that is that he is immortal. Nothing can hurt you. Taz can't swim, so falling in the water will teleport him to nearby dry land with no further penalty. There are plenty of environmental hazards like lava, spikes, or electricity, but they just slow you down or bounce you around. Sometimes you can even use these to your advantage. Not even enemies can hurt you. All that they'll ever do is knock you around. You also can't kill them. You can knock them out, but they'll get up after a few seconds. Some may say this makes the game too easy, But enemies were never a serious source of challenge in these kinds of games. And this game just takes that to the logical extreme by making the challenge not about getting hurt and taking damage, but instead having your progress impeded. The point of the enemies is just to get in the way, and they serve their purpose well. Just because you can't die doesn't mean there is a lack of challenge. This is how they incorporate slapstick into the gameplay, which I think makes a lot of sense. Slapstick is a big part of those cartoons. These characters constantly take a beating but get right back up. So why not incorporate that into the gameplay? Now, one might accuse these enemies of just being annoying since you can't get rid of them. And perhaps they could, but the punishment for getting hit by them is so minor that it really doesn't get annoying. In fact, oftentimes it's just funny when an enemy knocks you around or flattens you. And it's thanks to the unique animations for this, though there are some overlap. But another cool thing is, most enemies will react differently to you if you're wearing a costume, even making them not even try to attack you for a moment before they figure out that you're Taz. The construction workers will raise their hands when you're in a SWAT costume, and the ninja costume will make these guards do ninja poses before they fall over. Enemies also react in different ways to you attacking them with a costume. My favorite of which is these cowboys who act like they're being shot before realizing you were just using your fingers. This adds a lot of personality to the enemies and the game as a whole. Now, there are a couple unique enemies that are found in every level. First are the Whack-in-a-Boxes. These are boxes that, when approached, launch a spring-loaded boxing glove to send you flying, and there's no avoiding them. I love these enemies, one reason being that I never get tired of being hit by them. It's just funny every time I get close to them and then BAM! The sound design really brings it together. But there is a way past them. The invisibility potion will let you sneak by, but the main way to get rid of them is with these spin pads. You activate them by spinning on them, which will deactivate the Whack-in-a-Boxes for a limited time. You have a ticking sound to indicate for how long they are off. When they are deactivated, you can destroy them, and unlike the normal enemies, once you break one, it's gone until you leave the level. So a constant challenge throughout the game is spinning on a spin pad, then rushing to the boxes to destroy them and gain access to new areas. This is something that gets built upon the entire game, and they get good use out of it, even if it is a simple mechanic. Now, the other unique enemy is the Taz Catcher. These guys have nets, and if you get close enough to them, they run right for you and attempt to catch you, and it's very difficult to avoid them. When they catch you, they put you in a cage that you can easily break out of. Not much of a punishment, but it also gets rid of your costume, and it lowers your bounty, but I'll go over what bounty is later. These guys can be rather bothersome. When they're around, you'll need to be extra careful as they're the only real threat you will face. They can't kill you, but the punishment is more severe than any other enemy. If you manage to sneak up on them, you can knock them out, or scare them, but like the other enemies, they will just get back up. But there is a way to permanently get rid of them: the costume attacks. For most of the costumes, it's pretty easy, but the more short-range attacks can be very difficult to hit them with. Sometimes it feels like you should be able to hit them, but can't. The invisibility potion is very helpful for taking them out with close-range attacks. The ones where there isn't a potion nearby, you're just gonna have to deal with, because good luck trying to hit them. This is a neat enemy type that works well thematically and mechanically by increasing tension in a way no other enemy is capable of, given the more permanent damage they can cause. But there's one annoying part of them. When you defeat one with a costume, Taz will spin in place and discard the costume, forcing you to get it again. I don't know why this happens. Losing your costume is supposed to be one of the punishments for getting caught, but it also happens when you defeat them. It doesn't add any challenge, all it does is force you to go back to another phone booth to get another one. It's just a waste of time. This is one of the only real problems I have with this game, which is a good sign. As annoying as it is, it's only a small annoyance. Now, when I said this was a 3D platformer, more specifically, this is a collectathon. Although you technically aren't collecting things, you're destroying things. Unless you want to say you're collecting the sandwiches in your stomach, but I'm getting ahead of myself. You start off in a small hub that connects to 3 levels that you can enter in any order. There are 3 of these hubs, each of which also connect to 3 levels. For the first hub, you can only access one of the 3 levels, though as soon as you enter it, the other levels open, so you can exit and play them in any order. Once you have access to the other hubs, you can use this door to choose which other hubs to go to. So being a collectathon, each level is an open sandbox full of collectibles and objectives you must complete. There are 4 objectives, the main one being to find and destroy all 7 wanted posters in a level. As soon as you enter a level, Tweety will give you hints on each of them, while showing you the vague location they are. The wanted posters are the primary objective, and the only one required to beat the game. You need to get all the wanted posters in each level of an area to access the boss of that area. Now, most collectathons don't operate like this, instead having a specific number of collectibles required, and you have the freedom to pick and choose which ones you get. Taz does lose out on this freedom by requiring you to destroy every wanted poster. However, I don't think that really detracts much from this game. You only have 7 in each level. The levels aren't that big, they have distinct landmarks, so they're easy to navigate. And they give enough hints to the location, going so far to show the location on your map. It is not very demanding to find them all. Even later in the game, where it's a bit trickier to find them, it really is not all that difficult. Now, generally, I believe collectathons shouldn't require you to collect everything to beat the game. This is why, despite loving the first Banjo, I do think it's a problem that you need to get 94 out of the 100 jiggies to beat it. It doesn't allow much for the freedom collectathons are supposed to give you. But I think Taz can get away with it because it's a small game. If you only needed like half of them, you could breeze through the game very quickly. So while more freedom in that regard would be preferable, it doesn't detract much. Now, the purpose of the wanted posters. Destroying all 7 will unlock the exit to the level. You need to go there to beat the level. Doing so will eject you from the level in a comedic fashion while bringing something from it that will be used to access the boss. The secondary function of the wanted posters is each one destroyed will increase your bounty. Taz has a bounty on him, and it will increase as you destroy more posters and complete other objectives. When a Taz catcher catches you, your bounty decreases. Your bounty is basically your score. It doesn't serve any real function. You can unlock concept art, but that's mainly it. It's similar to getting money in Luigi's Mansion, it's just score for the sake of it. But I don't think that's a problem. Both are short games, so having a score system is a good way to increase replay value. I will say Luigi's Mansion handles it better as it takes more skill to get a higher amount of money with the speedy spirits as well as the pearls the portrait ghosts drop, and every enemy will take some coins away when they hit you instead of just one enemy type doing it. Not to mention Luigi's Mansion actually ranks you at the end. But it's still a fine addition to Taz Wanted and is easily ignorable if you don't care about this sort of thing. I usually don't care too much about the score here, though I do try to avoid being caught as much as possible. The second objective in each level is to collect 100 sandwiches. The sandwiches are basically your standard secondary collectible in most collectathons. They are littered all over the place, often used to direct you towards points of interest in the level. Though unlike most collectathons with this type of collectible where you'd have to collect every single one for 100%, in Taz there are more than the required amount in the levels. Once you get 100 sandwiches, the rest will disappear. Now, there are pros and cons to this. The advantage this brings is a much faster pace than most other collectathons with this type of collectible. You can mostly pick up sandwiches as you go along, and will not have to scavenge every nook and cranny to find that last sandwich. Without that, you have a bigger focus on the wanted posters. The disadvantage, however, is decreased exploration. Exploration is the main driving force of collectathons. The challenge is to find everything by exploring every nook and cranny. Taz Wanted is a collectathon without a focus on exploration. There still is exploration involved in figuring out how to get to and destroy the wanted posters, but that's about it. This game isn't going for the slower, more methodical approach of being in a big environment and checking every stone for the goodies. It's about going in and rampaging through the area until you've destroyed everything that needs to be destroyed. While I prefer the more exploratory collectathons, there certainly isn't a problem with this approach, and it does fit Taz better this way. Now, your reward for getting 100 sandwiches is unlocking a bonus game for the level, and these are timed challenges. There are 2 types of challenges. One is racing through part of the level, either on foot or using a vehicle found in the level, or destroying a certain amount of boxes in the time limit. These minigames are okay. Not all that special, but not bad either. You can skip them easily, and I'm glad they are completely optional. All these do is increase your bounty when completed, so if you're going for score, you'll definitely want to do them. The third objective at each level is to destroy 50% of the destructible objects in the level. The percentage goes up on higher difficulties. Similarly to the sandwiches, the fact that it's only a percentage instead of all of them does increase the pace, while not having much exploration value to it. However, even if this game was more focused on exploration, it would still be better for them to be a percentage. If you had to destroy every object in the level, that would be extremely tedious given how many objects there are, and it would take away the fun of destroying them in the first place. It is really fun just spinning through a bunch of objects, but it would be a chore if you had to stop for every single one. Just like the sandwiches, this is a more get them as you go along type of collectible rather than something you need to go out of your way to get. And I do think it complements the gameplay and is very fitting for Taz. Once you destroyed enough objects, your bounty increases. And the fourth objective is to find the hidden Sam statue. There are one per level, and they are more well hidden. These offer the most exploration value, as they require more effort to find. Some can be annoying, like the one in Tazland, where I'm still unsure if this is how you're supposed to get it, or if I'm missing something. But most of them are pretty satisfying to uncover. They also will just increase your bounty when collected. So onto the levels themselves. The first 3 are pretty simple and not the most interesting. Not to say they're bad, they do a good job introducing the gameplay and various mechanics. And it is a good sign when the first few levels aren't as good as the later levels. It just gets better as you go along. Now there's not a whole lot that Looney Tunes has going for it. It is the first level, so it's mostly here to teach you how to play, and it does an effective job at it. Right away you see that wanted posters come in a variety of shapes and sizes. They aren't all just the standard signs you spin into to destroy. For instance, one of them is on a van that is hanging off a ledge that you need to push off. Another is on a tower that requires you to break its supports to bring it down. While yes, a lot of the time what you need to do is find the thing you need to destroy and spin into it, the different methods of which makes it more satisfying to do. This tower wouldn't be as interesting if you just found a normal sign here. Not all of them are so simple. This one in the bear cage has honey below it. Wet floors or ice will cause Taz to slip. You can still walk on them with ice physics, but if you attempt to spin you lose all control and fall. So to destroy this one, you need the burp power-up. Again, this is a good tutorial level, but it is rather simple, most requiring basic navigational skills to find everything, but it does make a good use out of the whack-in-a-boxes and other hazards. There are these monkeys that you can swing off of, but they're kind of annoying. It's not too hard, but it just doesn't feel too good to use. Iceberg might be my least favorite level, though it still isn't bad, and it does have more interesting and involved wanted posters, like a sign you need to destroy by making the cable car speed up. It's just I find this level more boring to travel through. Plus you have ice all over the place, which is just annoying. There's nothing really wrong with this level, it's just not very interesting most of the time. It also repeats the vehicle hanging off a cliff thing the last level did. You do have this sign that's on ice that you once again need a burp power up to destroy, but it also involves a platforming challenge to get to it. Looney Lagoon has a lot of water, and often you need to platform across it, which can be a bit tough, but nothing too bad. The main things that stand out in this level are the various cannons that fire you around the level, even being used to destroy the ship. There is more verticality in this level, and up here are a couple slides that you'll go down a few times for all the stuff, including a wanted poster in this sink, that you first need to drain the water from by going down one part of the slide and then go down another part to get to it. Another thing introduced here that is used throughout the game are these gramophones. They will play some soothing music, which is just the tiptoe variant of the music, which will cause Taz to be put in a trance where he can only slowly walk forward. You can't jump or spin or do anything other than walk forward. These parts either require you to somehow destroy the gramophone without getting close to it, usually using the burp power-up like this level does twice, or navigating narrow paths without falling. Looney Lagoon is easily the best level of the first set, having the most involved wanted posters and the most interesting level design. The second set of levels is in a city, and I think this is where the game starts to shine. Samsonian Museum is the first interior level, so it requires you to navigate corridors without being able to view the entire environment from everywhere. There are multiple paths connecting to the start, and also areas above. The complexity of the objectives ramps up here, requiring you to do things like have a whack-in-the-box launch you into a mirror to break through it, navigating a chess match where the black spots are holes, or rotate this coin to go through the slot. One of the funniest wanted posters in the game is one that was painted on the floor, and to destroy it you need to find this cleaning machine and ride it to the spot where you literally clean up the poster. It can be a bit weird to control, but it's still a fun poster to get rid of. Being a museum, they do a lot of creative stuff in the environment, like this portal that takes you behind these paintings, or other paintings you can go into and have stuff like this happen. And then there's this room where random objects will fall on you, and I just find it funny every time, even if it is just a waste of time. This is a really fun level, and the rest of the area is of similar quality. Looney-Dale is also an interior level, but it has wide open spaces. Not as much to say about this one, it's just a solid level with similar qualities to the last. You'll have to balance on narrow platforms full of whack-in-a-boxes for this poster. This room requires you to find these ballistas to create platforms that lead to the poster, and in here you can ride a shopping cart. The whack-in-a-boxes ignore you when you're in the cart, and you can destroy them without the spin pad, oddly. But then there's Bank of Samerica, and this is a great level. It's a big construction site with 2 towers next to each other. Naturally, this is a very vertical level, and this has the most complex navigation in the game as you'll be traveling between the towers. You'll launch yourself out of cement mixers, teleport in these porta-potties, go down these slides, use elevators that go both vertical and horizontal. There are a lot of ways you'll be getting around this place. Now, falling off the buildings can be devastating, but that's what the teleporters are for. Now, a good number of the posters are at the bottom of the level. They could have spread them out a bit better, but there's still plenty of stuff to do in between. And this is just a fun level to go through if you're up to the challenge. Certainly the most complex level up to this point. The second set of levels easily outclasses the first. They're visually and mechanically much more interesting while offering a bigger challenge without going too far. The third set of levels are of similar quality to the second set. Granny Canyon is another one of my favorite levels, mostly for aesthetic reasons. You start on the long road with falling objects, and at the end you get the classic painted-on tunnel gag. I love that they added that. This level is a bit simpler than the last, though it isn't lacking in quality. Some of the posters are easy to get to, but you still have more interesting ones, like having to follow these cables to find this switch to destroy a train, or a balancing part with a gramophone. There's some cool cameos here, like finding Wile E. Coyote's hideout. There is a bit of a challenge to the navigation in this level, but there's not a lot unique to really say about it. Taz Wanted automatically gets points for the spooky theme, but this one is a bit more difficult getting around, but has more interesting set pieces like this roller coaster part, or this weird part where you get turned into a mouse, then get turned into a ball. You have to hit all these buttons as a ball, and it can be a bit annoying since hitting one of the cables puts you all the way back here. Luckily, the buttons you already pushed stay pushed, so it's not too bad. There's also more involved platforming, and the biggest gramophone section. And altogether, this is one of the strongest levels in the game. Now, the cartoon strip mine is more of the same quality, with some of the toughest navigation. There's this fun spinning section and more platforming, but there is one part that kind of sucks. There's a minecart section, somewhat similar to the roller coaster, in the last level, but much more annoying. You can jump, lean, and tilt, as well as use a boost to go faster, but it's hardly worth using as it'll just make it harder to avoid obstacles. The main issue with it is that if you run into a single obstacle, you have to start the whole thing over again, and the track is a bit long. That is annoying, and sometimes it doesn't even feel like your own fault. With some patience and practice you can do it, but it's probably the worst part of the game. The rest of the level is pretty good though, and the third set of levels in general is on a similar level to the second set, though I'm not sure which is overall better. Now, there are only 3 sets of levels, but there is one more level independent of the other sets. Tazland. It's okay. There's nothing especially wrong with it, nor is there much of interest. There are some slightly annoying sections, like this gramophone part, and it can be a bit punishing if you fall in certain spots, but nothing too bad. This level does have some treacherous platforming, but that's most of what this level has to offer that's unique. Overall, this game does have a good set of levels. Each level is at least good, but I had a difficult time trying to discuss them individually. And it's because they don't do a lot to stand apart from each other in a gameplay sense. The general gameplay is basically unchanged to the entire game. How you interact with the levels is the same. Aside from the level's theme, the most unique stuff here is the wanted posters themselves, but you interact with the wanted posters in the same couple ways. This normal poster may seem different from the one where you use a stick of dynamite to blow up a train with the poster on it, but what you do to destroy them is the same. Spin into it or the thing that destroys it. There are exceptions where the way you destroy a wanted poster is different, but most of them are pretty similar. I'm making it sound worse than it is. It doesn't really take much away from the game. The level design is good, but not exceptional, and it could have had more to flesh it out. Let's look at Banjo-Kazooie, where each level had unique stuff about them that changed the way you interacted with the level. Treasure Trove Cove is full of water. You can swim, but in this level there is a shark that will appear when you enter it. Looney Lagoon is also full of water, but you interact with the water the same way you interact with it in every other level. Clanker's Cavern is another good example. The level is primarily a big open space full of water. A lot of stuff is under the water, so you'll need to do a lot of swimming. More swimming than any other level. You play this level differently than the rest because of this. Taz can't have a level like this because Taz can't swim. Mad Monster Mansion has a lot of interior sections that you go back and forth through. and Click Clock Wood has different seasons that adjust the level. These levels stand out from each other in a gameplay sense because of stuff like this. Taz kinda lacks this. There isn't much to say about these levels individually because there's a lot of overlap. The things these levels do that set them apart are mostly aesthetical elements. It's like trying to compare two different levels from Mario 1. Aside from obviously different level design, there isn't much to talk about because the mechanics and obstacles are the same. There isn't something unique gameplay-wise to make a comparison. Bank of Samerica stands out the most because of its verticality. That is an element that fundamentally changes how you play this level. But it's the only one like this. These levels have their own set pieces, but these set pieces don't change how you play the level. Taz can't rely on hazards to vary up the levels because it can't die, unlike Banjo, where the thing that changes how you play could be hazardous water. There's also the point that there were many ways you would get jiggies, while as I said, the method of destroying Wanted posters is mostly the same. And Banjo also has extra moves you can learn that would add new mechanics to the levels. These abilities actively change how levels are designed. Taz's moveset is unchanging. Aside from the costumes, which don't have any effect on how you play the level, nor does it have an effect on the level design. Now Mario manages to get away with an unchanging moveset, but the levels still have more unique stuff going for them like Banjo. All this to say that while the level design in Taz Wanted is good and fun to play through, it lacks that extra spice to make each level truly stand out amongst themselves. And it prevents it from being a truly exceptional set of levels. I love these levels. I have a blast playing through this game. But after I struggled to come up with meaningful things to say about each level on an individual basis, I kinda had to concede to this flaw. After you complete each level in an area, you gain access to the boss. And these aren't your standard 3D platformer bosses. Each of them are completely different. First up is Elephant Pong. Yes, Elephant Pong. So you're up against Gossamer, and there's an elephant that is running towards you, and you need to scare it so it goes in the other direction. Gossamer will also scare it, and you need to make sure it goes in his goal while making sure it doesn't go in your goal. It's literally Pong, but with an elephant. The concept is pretty funny, and it works pretty well. Though unlike normal Pong, where you just move in front of the ball to bounce it, here you need to actively push a button to scare it. Also, it will move faster, and after a while it'll take a second before he starts moving the other way because of how fast he's moving. So it can be rather difficult intentionally trying to aim it into a goal. But after a while, Gossamer will just mess up, and scaring the elephant is pretty generous with how far away he needs to be for it to count. So the difficulty is rather comfortable, so I'd say it's a good first boss. Also, I mentioned I love the music for this, but too bad you won't be hearing it over the... At least Sam's reaction to you getting a goal is pretty good.
Scare the elephant. I'll invite him to dinner.
The second boss isn't too good. You're competing against Daffy and Gladiatoons. All you need to do is roll your ball over these lights to change them to your color, and you need to have more of them than Daffy when the time runs out. It's a simple concept, but the issue is it's hard to control because you constantly are getting bounced around. It's like a pinball table at times. And these magnets that send you flying are the most irritating. It's not that hard, but it often feels like it's up to luck, and it just isn't fun. The next boss, Dodge City, is much better though. This one is unique in that you actually can die. Taz has a helmet with a number on it, and that number represents how many hits you can take. This fight is basically Bomberman. Sam will throw dynamite at you, and it explodes in a cross shape like in Bomberman. All you're doing is using Sam's own dynamite to break obstacles so you can get to the big TNT crates next to Sam, so you blow him up. Every big crate you destroy shortens the fuse on the TNT Sam throws at you. It's simple, but good enough. The penultimate boss, Disco Volcano, has you against Sam again. But here you're both on a circular platform surrounded by lava. Sam will avoid you, generally staying on the exact opposite side from you. He will attempt to blow up the island if he gets close to one of the switches. If he does this 6 times, you lose. And I don't know why, but I always found it amusing whenever he gets to one of these and is like,
Come on. Come on.
To beat him, you need him to start attempting to push down one of these switches, then grab a pepper from the center platform and use it to set Sam on fire. Doing this 6 times is how you win. It's a simple but fun fight that may go on a bit long since it requires 6 hits, and unlike some of the others, there really isn't an escalation in difficulty, so you're doing the same thing. And the fight in general is rather easy, the only challenge being to avoid the lava once you have a pepper since you lose it if you fall in, but it's really not that difficult. And the final boss, the Hindenburg, and this is one of the worst bosses. Like in Dodge City, you have a limited amount of health, and here it's fairly easy to get hit, so this fight can be quite challenging at times. The main reason this fight kinda sucks is because for each phase, you will need to eat something, then spit it out to hurt Tweety, and it's not easy to be precise with the spitting. The first phase isn't too bad, just spit it at Tweety when his shield is down. The second phase, however, you'll start powering up an electrical attack that's hard to avoid, and you need to wait until he's about to attack for these things to rise up, then hit the glowing parts to damage it. It's hard to aim at them, especially when trying to dodge Tweety's attacks, and you need to hit each of them like 3 times. And the final phase also sucks. Tweety will constantly be shooting you with homing attacks that are hard to dodge, and you need to spit at the locks holding the door up, but you can't just hit them all, because they reset after a specific amount of time, and each one is different, so you have to figure out which order to hit them so they don't reset before you hit them all. And the correct order isn't always the same, it's randomized. This phase is just annoying and easy to die on as well. Now luckily, you start on the phase you died on, so it is forgiving in that regard, but it's just not fun. The bosses are pretty hit and miss. Most of them are fine, but not amazing or anything, and the other 2 kinda suck. The bad ones aren't the worst things ever, but it's still a bit of a sour note the game ends on. And that is Taz Wanted, one of my favorite little hidden gems. While it may not be an amazing game, I do think people have been harsh towards it. It's a much better game than what some people have given it credit for. It does a lot right, especially from a presentational standpoint, audio quality on the voice acting notwithstanding. The game is flawed in some areas, the bosses are a mixed bag, and the levels, while overall well designed, don't do a lot to stand out from each other, but the core gameplay of controlling Taz to rampage through these environments, and the score attack element, hold the game up. It can't compete with the giants of the genre, but it's still a worthwhile entry into it. It's a simple and short, but fun and fast-paced collectathon that I think deserves some more attention. And that's all I had to say about this game. I'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for watching. I know this video might seem a bit random, but as I mentioned in my update video, I wanted to do a few smaller reviews after Sticker Star. Well, I say small, but this still ended up being nearly an hour long. Anyways, I got a couple other reviews of similar caliber up next before I focus on bigger projects. If everything goes right, I should be able to have one ready for Halloween, but that's it. If you are able and willing, I have a Patreon, so please consider supporting me there if you feel like I've earned it. And speaking of, I'd like to thank my patrons, Tanuki, Enemy, Just a Blank, Kaiju, Bowie, and Neo.